What's up, guys? I'm Jeff, the founder of Worldwide Cyclery, and today we're going to talk about the 101 basic things that are involved in adjusting, installing, and replacing a rear derailleur on your mountain bike. So there are a ton of different derailleurs and drivetrains out there for mountain bikes, and it would pretty much be impossible to make a video that would go into the details of every single different one. So when we were thinking about a video in regards to installing a new rear derailleur, adjusting a new rear derailleur, or replacing one, I figured let's make one that's sort of the 101 basics that has all of the key things that are relevant to every single drivetrain out there, as opposed to focusing on the nitty-gritty details of each different one, because there's going to be a different tool that you're probably going to need for a Sram derailleur versus a Shimano derailleur versus a box derailleur, etc. But they all do have some common things that we can go over. So that's what we're going to dive right into. So to start off is your derailleur hanger. So the derailleur hanger is attached to your frame. Every bike sort of does it a little bit differently. These things are typically proprietary to the frame, almost always made out of aluminum, and they're like that. So when you do crash on this thing, which you will at some point, it will bend and it won't destroy your derailleur or your frame, so it's a replaceable part. That's an important thing to know, because if you do bend one of those, it can tweak your derailleur inward, which is how then you shift up and your derailleur goes into your spokes. So a very key thing, if you think, wow, my bike's not shifting well, I might need a new rear derailleur, first consider your derailleur might be fine, you might just have a bent hanger. So if you're looking at the back of your bike, look at how straight that derailleur is and look at that derailleur hanger, and if you can visually see that it's bent, it's most likely a derailleur hanger issue. And derailleur hangers are a lot cheaper than actual derailleurs, which is part of the reason why they exist, so that way when you do crash, you bend the hanger and you only need to replace that, and you don't need to replace the actual entire derailleur. So that's a key thing to factor in. You need a straight derailleur hanger. A brand new one, if you bent one, you can sometimes get away with bending them back. Park Tool actually makes a really cool tool that helps you bend it back, that basically every bike shop in the country, or probably the world, has. And that's okay to use if it's just slightly bent, but if it's pretty significantly bent, you don't want to use that, because when you bend an aluminum derailleur hanger and you bend it back, it has a really high likelihood of then just snapping in half at that point where it's been bent and bent back. So I always advise, if you bent your derailleur hanger, if you have a nice bike or even a moderately nice bike, just get a new derailleur hanger and move on from there. So that's sort of one common thing with bikes, and that is derailleur hangers. Next up in terms of adjustment is B tension. I don't really know why they call it B tension, where the B comes from. Maybe you guys could tell me in the comments. But what B tension is it's going to determine how far away this upper pulley wheel sits away from your cassette. And those adjustments on a SRAM, it's a 3mm Allen. On a lot of derailleurs, it's a Phillips head screwdriver. But that, again, it pulls it away. And that's relevant because it needs to be correct in order to allow the proper amount of distance between each cassette cog and that top pulley wheel for the thing to shift properly. Where you can really see B tension and its relevance is when you're in that largest cassette cog, and this distance right here between that top pulley wheel and that cassette cog, that's where it really matters. Kind of the way you can tell if that's adjusted incorrectly, well, if it's too far away, it's going to be impossible to get the thing to just shift smoothly throughout all of the gears. And if it's too close, typically what happens is if you're in, say, the 3rd or 4th gear down and you shift quickly and push all of them this way, it's going to make sort of a weird sound or clog up. That's kind of if your B tension is, you know, the screw is actually too far out, meaning that the upper pulley wheel is too close to the cassette cog. So B tension is really important, and it adjusts this distance right here, basically the distance between this pulley wheel and all of your cassette cogs. Again, it's right here. So B tension is another important one. Moving on, high and low screws. So derailleurs are basically all parallelograms that kind of move like this, and you have your high and low limit screws is what they call them. And what that limits is it limits how far the derailleur will actually be able to move side to side. Why that's important is because you don't want your derailleur to be able to move so far to the side that it would potentially throw your chain off behind the largest cog into the spokes, and then you might get your entire derailleur wrapped up in the spokes and you have yourself a huge issue. So a lot of times when you see bikes that have had the derailleur wrapped up in the spokes, a couple things happen. One, they bent the derailleur hanger on a crash, bent inward, and then they shifted into their largest cog, and because it was bent, it gets sucked into the spokes. Another big reason is because they just adjusted their limit screws incorrectly, and you can see this derailleur, because it's properly adjusted, there's no play here. So I can squeeze this with my hand and try and push this chain off of the cog into the spokes, and it won't go. And that's because of a properly adjusted limit screw. If you have a bunch of play here and you can squeeze this and try and push it over and it throws the chain over, that limit screw is not adjusted correctly. The other limit screw is on the low end, so that's what's keeping it from throwing off of the smallest cog into the frame. So those are your high and low limit screws. Every derailleur has them. They're extremely important to get that adjustment right. Next thing is cable tension. So cable tension, there's a number of different ways to adjust it. A lot of derailleurs have a barrel adjuster right here. Some of more higher end derailleurs don't. You just kind of rely on the barrel adjust that's on your shifter. Again, the way the cable routes through the derailleur and even the type of bolt that attaches the cable to the derailleur can vary widely depending on the brand and the model of derailleur. But either way, you need the right cable tension in order for the whole thing to shift correctly. So that's another vital step. Typically a good rule of thumb, you can start with your shifter in the lowest gear, kind of guesstimate your cable tension down here, and then start playing with it through the gears, and you can tell if you need more or less cable tension. Again, we're not going to go super in depth on all the adjustments and how to do it. We're just going to kind of cover like the basic things that all derailleurs have in common that are necessary. Moving on from cable tension, things that absolutely need to be right in order for the whole system to work correctly is chain length and chain routing. That's an entirely another video that you can search, but typically, depending on if the bike's full suspension or a hardtail, and again, the drivetrain makes a huge difference, you need the proper chain length, because you don't want, when you're in this largest cog, if this thing looked like this, because this chain was so short, that would be pretty much a warning sign, because then when the suspension activates, this is going to potentially rip the derailleur off the bike. And vice versa, when it's in the lowest gear, the smallest cog, you can see this, again, correct chain length here, because you still have some tension on the derailleur and nothing's hitting. If this chain was too long, this would be pulled back further, and this chain would be hitting itself right here on the upper pulley wheel, or would have just a ton of slop in it. So the chain length is a very important thing to get right. Again, there's probably a million other videos you can check out. Some of the best videos we've found in terms of all of this sort of stuff, like the actual how-to nitty-gritty stuff, Park Tool, their YouTube channel is amazing and is full of like really good videos on actually how to do every one of these things individually. So if you've watched this video, you've understood some basics, and you kind of now are thinking like, I think my issue is adjusting bead tension, go search that. Or if you think, I think my issue might be a bent derailleur hanger, go search that. Or if you really want to get in depth with high and low screws, go search that and sort of get some more visuals of how those things work. The last thing I want to talk about is chain routing. This is a very common mistake people make when they replace a derailleur or install a new one. And what I mean by chain routing is the common mistake that people make. All of these derailleurs, SRAM and Shimano, have a tab right here that's in between basically your upper and lower pulley wheel. A lot of people will route the chain and they'll accidentally put it in front of the tab, and it'll be rubbing on the metal. You can actually still get the thing to work properly like that, but it sounds funky because you have the chain literally rubbing on a piece of metal on the derailleur cage. So that's kind of your big warning sign of what's going wrong right there, and it's super common. We see bikes come into our shop pretty often where someone installed a new chain or a new derailleur and they just routed it wrong. It's especially easy to do on Shimano XT derailleurs because the tab is so close. It almost looks like you did it right. But if you see your chain touching anything other than actual teeth, that's your warning sign right there. The chain should only ever be touching the teeth on the chainring, the teeth on the cassette cogs, and then the teeth on the pulley wheels. It should never be rubbing on anything else, such as the tab on the cage right there. So those are sort of the 101 most common aspects of every rear derailleur. Hopefully this video is helpful for you guys. Let us know in the comments if you have any question. We're always happy to help sort of troubleshoot that stuff. Check out Park Tools channel for more in-depth details on how to do all the adjustments here. Let us know if you guys have any questions. Hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next one.